So I've come to the northern coast of Zealand, which is the largest island in Denmark, where I live now. And we've just got the storm Malik passing us. And obviously I wanted to come out and see because we have elevated sea. So you can see we have the beach down here, and we have a lot of water pushing in on the coast. So usually you can see like probably the coast is all the way out here or something like that, the beach. And I'm basically just shooting straight into the sunset. I gotta admit, there's not a whole lot to photograph right here. But I put on my 28-200 millimeter and basically shooting straight towards the sunset with a composition that looks something like this here. I really like the glow down here, and there are some birds. If I just like enlarge the screen, you can see here there are some birds flying around along the sea, and it actually looks really cool with the sun behind and how the waves are getting hit with the backlit sun. And yeah, my 28-200 millimeter, it's basically my most used lens. Like it's my go-to lens basically for everything, especially when I'm in a new location. I'm just like driving around the landscape and just scouting. Like 28-200 millimeter is just such a wide focal length range. And yeah, so that's basically what I'm doing. Quite simple. Since I'm shooting into the sun, I'm shooting at like f11, ISO 100, plenty of light, so that gives me a shutter speed of 1/400th of a second. I could maybe lower it to like f8, but I'm all the way out at 200 millimeters, so I think, yeah, this is probably fine. This is probably good. It looks really epic. It looks really nice. So yeah, I'll just sit here because the wind is quite heavy and there's a lot of wind coming in from here. So I'll just like stay low, making sure that the wind is not shaking the camera too much. That's kind of the downside to the Tamron. There's no inbuilt stabilization. It's all in camera. So it's not always super duper steady. So I'm back home and I'm looking in my archive. So I've owned the 28-200 millimeter for about a year, and there's no doubt that it is my most used lens. The question is for 2020, where I think that it was my 24-205. That's my most used lens. It's interesting to see how big part of my portfolio could actually have been taken by the 28-200 millimeter, or should I just use the 24-205 millimeter, because they do overlap quite a lot. So I've just collected all my favorite photos, or most of my favorite photos from 2020 and 2021, just to have enough data. So as you can see here, I have collected a lot of my favorite photos into one big folder here, and there are 97 photos right here. So I've color coded them. All the red ones cover the focal length range from 12 millimeter all the way to 23 millimeter. All the yellows are 24-205. All the greens are 106 to 200 millimeter. And all the blue are from 200 millimeter or 201 millimeter to 400 millimeters. And when I put them all on, I've also given some stars. those are taken with a drone, so they don't really count. They just fall in at 28 millimeter because that is the equivalent focal length range of a DJI Mavic 2 Pro. And then I have some with 2 stars. Those fall within the focal length range of 24 to 28 millimeter. So there are only 3 photos where I would have had to use the 24 to 105 millimeter, but usually I have the 16 to 35 millimeter with me when I'm out with the 28 to 200 millimeter. But nevertheless, if we just put on all the yellow ones and all the green ones, you can see that they take up the vast majority of my portfolio. Even also if I take off the 8 drone photos and the 3 that goes from 24 to 28 millimeter. So that would put it down to 57 items out of 97 items. So that's 57 photos that has been taken in the range of 28 to 200 millimeter over the past 2 years, and 40 that has been taken outside, whereas 8 of them has been taken with a drone. So it is easy to see that my favorite focal length range is definitely the standard focal length range. If we go in, I only have 15 photos that actually came into my favorite photos the past 2 years that has been taken from 12 to 24 millimeter. That's actually also a big surprise to me. Well, obviously it's not a big surprise because I had a pretty good idea about my favorite photos. But I'm actually not using those super wide angle lenses to create photos that I, in the long run, are super interested in. So as mentioned, it's not a huge surprise because I have a feeling with my own photos that my wide angle photos have a tendency to not last for a long time. However, the photos I have in here that are wide angle, I am actually really happy about them. But as you can see in most of the photos, it's not because that they have that really strong foreground. It's not like, that foreground where the photo is basically like puking the foreground into your face. This one here is probably, and this one here, and this one are probably those where it is the most pronounced, the foreground. But then again, like I've taken this basically from eye height. This one here, I was very close to the bubbles. And this one here, yeah, probably something like this. So when it comes to using my wide angle lens, I'm definitely not using it in the sense that I'm using it to really blow the foreground into the face of the viewer. For some reason, this one here also a little bit, it doesn't really have a big effect on how I like to show my photos. So if we go back and then we look at my long lens photos, you can also see that I actually don't have a whole lot of photos that end up being my favorites beyond the 200 millimeters. And that is actually quite interesting because I have had the 100 to 400 for a long time. Well, at least the past couple of years. And even though I use it a lot, I think, for some reason, those photos don't really end up being having a longevity for me either. That being said, I am really happy about these photos, these 9 photos. So, again, what can you actually conclude? What I can conclude definitely, based on all this, is that my favorite focal length range is mainly between 24 to 200 millimeter, and it's probably more like 30 millimeter to 150-ish millimeter. So if there's any lens manufacturers out there who want to make a super sharp lens from edge to edge at all focal lengths within that focal length range, or at all apertures, super sharp lens at all apertures from edge to edge throughout the entire focal length range from 30 to 150 millimeter, you have a buyer. So what can we actually learn from all of this? Well, basically, as what I've said for the most part, make sure that you should probably optimize your gear in a sense so that you have as few lenses that cover the widest amount of focal lengths as possible, yet make sure that you do not compromise on the image quality in those focal lengths that you use the most, I guess. It's always hard to talk about gear. Just get the lenses that works for you and get the job done and produces the photos that you are the most satisfied with. I think that must be the conclusion. Obviously, if you want to learn how I compose my photos, when you look through all these photos, be sure to get my 2 ebooks on composition. Here I go through all the different tools that I use in the field when I compose my photos. And if you want to learn how I edit my photos like these ones here, make sure that you enroll in my huge Photoshop for Landscape Photographers post-processing course. There is a 15% discount in the description. Also there, I cover all the editing tools I use. I do it in a very progressive way. So we start easy and then we go through and make it harder and harder. And I cover luminosity masks, how to add and remove glow, how to get the most out of Photoshop for you as a landscape photographer. And even though you maybe have started out as a Lightroom user and you are on the border to jump into Photoshop, then hopefully this course is the one that can get you started so you can really benefit the most from like the most powerful editing software in the world, which is Photoshop. So check out all the links down in the description. Let me know down in the comments which one lens is your preferred and which one focal length range is your preferred. Where do you end up with most photos, in what focal length range? So yeah, as always, smash the like button, as we say. If you don't like this video, smash it twice. And comment, share this video if you benefited from it in any way, shape or form. And see you in the next one.